My parents kicked me out at 18 for my brother. Now they're homeless and want my help. When I was 18, my parents sat me down at the same dining table where we had eaten 1,000 meals together and told me that my time was up. It was my birthday of all days, a milestone that should have marked the start of adulthood on my own terms. Instead, it was the day I learned that I wasn't welcome in my own home anymore. "You're grown now," my father had said, his voice firm, unwavering. "It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet." My mother, always the softer of the two, but no less complicit, had pressed her lips into a tight line and offered me a brittle smile. "It's for the best, sweetheart. We know you'll figure it out." Figure it out. 2 words that erased 18 years of being their child. I still remember the way my younger brother, Ethan, had lounged on the couch, pretending not to hear the conversation that would change my life forever. He didn't even bother to look up from his phone. He didn't have to. He already knew he wasn't going anywhere. Because while I was being shoved out into the world with nothing but a half-empty suitcase and a few crumpled bills, Ethan was staying. My parents had made that clear. The house was his. The support, the love, the comfort of family. All his. "You're smart," my father had added, as if that was some kind of consolation. "You'll be fine." And that was the last thing they gave me. A backhanded compliment and a door slammed in my face. I wasn't fine. At least, not at first. I had no plan, no safety net, nothing but the clothes on my back and the crushing weight of betrayal in my chest. I spent nights on park benches, in shelters, in the cramped backseat of a car I barely managed to hold on to. I worked jobs that chewed me up and spat me out, my body aching from long shifts that paid just enough to keep me breathing, but never enough to live. And the worst part? They never called. Not once. Not to check if I was okay. Not to see if I had a roof over my head. For them, I had ceased to exist the moment I walked out that door. Ethan, on the other hand, flourished under their care. He went to college, fully funded by the very people who had left me to rot. He drove a car they bought for him, lived in an apartment they paid for, and enjoyed a life of effortless ease while I clawed my way up from the dirt. But I did claw my way up. Through grit, rage, and sheer unrelenting determination, I built something for myself. I found work that turned into a career, scraped together every dime until I could afford a place of my own, carved out a future without them. And eventually, I thrived. I had money, stability, a home that was mine. I had everything they refused to give me. But I never forgot. I never forgot the nights I spent starving, the jobs that broke my body, the loneliness that wrapped around me like a noose. And I never forgave them for forcing me to endure it. So when they called me out of the blue, years after they had tossed me aside, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe a darker, crueler part of me that wanted to hear them beg, made me pick up the phone. "We need to talk." My mother's voice wavered on the other end. She sounded different, older, weaker. "Please. It's important." For a moment I considered hanging up, letting her feel what it was like to be ignored, to be treated like an afterthought. But then, against my better judgment, I said, "Fine," because I needed to hear the words for myself. I needed to know exactly how far they had fallen. When I arrived at the coffee shop where we agreed to meet, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, once a proud, towering man who always carried himself with an air of quiet authority, looked small. His clothes hung looser than I remembered, his posture slightly hunched as if the weight of the world had finally settled onto his shoulders. My mother, always so composed, so elegant in her own modest way, looked frail. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired, the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than just a bad night's sleep. And then there was Ethan. I expected him to be smug. I expected him to be the same spoiled brat who had basked in the warmth of their love while I froze outside. But he wasn't. He looked lost. His clothes weren't the designer brands he used to flaunt. His hair was unkempt, his expression hollow. The golden child, the favorite, had lost his shine. It was almost poetic. I slid into the seat across from them, folding my hands on the table, waiting. I wanted them to say it, to tell me why, after all these years, I suddenly mattered again. My mother cleared her throat, forcing a weak smile. "It's good to see you." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" A flicker of something crossed her face. Shame, maybe. Regret. But I wasn't sure I cared anymore. She hesitated, then exhaled. We need help. I leaned back, arms crossed. Help? From me? My father stiffened, as if my tone offended him. He had no right to be offended. We lost the house, he admitted, his voice low, gruff. The money's gone. We have nowhere to go. For a moment I just stared at them, waiting for some part of me to feel something. Pity, sorrow, a sliver of the familial bond they had shattered so carelessly. But all I felt was satisfaction. Karma had finally come knocking. Ethan, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. I lost my job, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Things just fell apart. I almost laughed. Fell apart. As if misfortune had simply stumbled into their lives, unprovoked. No, this wasn't some cruel twist of fate. This was the bed they had made, and now they wanted me to save them from it. I could have walked away. I could have left them sitting there, drowning in their own mistakes, the same way they had left me. And God, I wanted to. But something inside me, not kindness, not forgiveness, but something darker, something sharper, made me stay. Because this wasn't just about helping them. This was about power. And if they wanted my help, they were going to have to earn it. I tapped my fingers against the table, studying their desperate faces. Then, slowly, I said, "If I help you, it's going to be on my terms." My father bristled. "We're still your parents." I cut him off with a sharp look. "You stopped being my parents the day you threw me out. So if you want my help now, you're going to listen. And you're going to do exactly what I say." Silence. My mother swallowed hard. Ethan's jaw tensed. They knew they had no choice. And that was exactly what I wanted, because I had spent years at their mercy. Now it was their turn. And I wasn't going to let them forget it. There was a time when I would have done anything for my parents' approval, when I would have swallowed my pride, ignored their favoritism, and begged for even the smallest crumb of their love. But that time was long gone. Now, as I sat across from them, watching the way their shoulders sagged under the weight of their failures, I felt nothing but cold, detached satisfaction. They had made their choices, and now they were paying for them. "Go on," I said, folding my arms as I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me why I should care." My mother flinched at my words as if she hadn't expected me to be so blunt. She had always been the emotional one, the one who smoothed things over while my father delivered the final verdicts. But there was no smoothing over this. My father, ever the proud man, clenched his jaw. Even now, even at his lowest, he hated that he had to come to me, that he had to beg the child he discarded. Good. Ethan, for once in his life, looked uncomfortable. He was used to things being easy, to problems disappearing the moment he looked to our parents for help. But now, there was no one left to clean up his mess. No one but me. We made mistakes," my mother finally said, her voice softer now, almost fragile. "We should have been better to you." I tilted my head. "You should have? That's a hell of an understatement." She swallowed hard. "I know, and I'm sorry." It was the first time in my life I had ever heard her apologize. And yet, it rang hollow. Too little. Too late. I kept my expression unreadable. "What exactly do you need from me?" My father exhaled through his nose, his pride visibly warring with his desperation. "We need a place to stay, just until we get back on our feet." I glanced at Ethan. "And you? What do you need?" His fingers twitched on the table, his gaze flickering toward our parents before landing back on me. "I lost my job," he admitted, "and without it, I can't afford my apartment." I let out a low hum. "So, let me get this straight. The same parents who threw me out onto the streets are now homeless and asking for a roof over their heads? And my golden boy of a brother, who had everything handed to him, now can't even support himself?" Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched between us, filled only by the distant hum of coffee shop chatter. I could feel the shift happening. The power dynamic that had once ruled my childhood, where I had been the unwanted extra, the disposable child, was crumbling. Now, they were the ones in need, and I was the only one who could save them. But the thing was, I didn't have to. I could have walked away, could have let them fend for themselves, just like they forced me to do all those years ago. But that wasn't enough. I didn't just want them to suffer. I wanted them to understand. "Fine," I said, leaning forward, watching their expressions shift with cautious relief. "You can stay at my house." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart, But," I cut in, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch, "there will be rules." I had worked my way out of nothing. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, I had built a life without them, a life of stability, one they had refused to give me. And now, I was letting them step into my world. But it would be on my terms. My house wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. A 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, paid for with years of sweat and sacrifice. It was everything I had never been given, a monument to my survival. And now, my parents, the very people who had denied me that security, stood hesitantly at the doorway, their suitcases pathetically small, their pride even smaller. Ethan was the last to step inside, his posture stiff with resentment. He hated this, hated needing me. Good. I closed the door behind them, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, I turned to face them. "Listen carefully," I said, my voice steady, firm. "This isn't a charity. This is a contract. You live here because I allow it. You eat because I say so. And if you break one of my rules, you're out. No second chances." My father bristled. "We're still your parents." "No." My voice cut through the room like a knife. "You stopped being my parents the day you kicked me out. Now you're just 3 people who owe me a debt." Silence. My mother's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Ethan clenched his fists, but he stayed quiet. I had all the power now, and they knew it. "First, you pay rent." It wasn't a high amount. In fact, it was less than what I had paid when I was struggling to survive. But it wasn't about the money. It was about teaching them what it felt like to earn the roof over their heads. Second, you do your share. Cooking, cleaning, maintaining the house. They had left me to fend for myself at 18. Now it was their turn to work for their place in my life. Third, you respect my boundaries. This was my home, my rules. No entitled demands, no guilt tripping, no pretending that we were some happy family. Fourth, no preferential treatment. Ethan didn't get a free ride. Not anymore. If he wanted to stay, he had to pull his weight. When I laid out the conditions, my father looked like he wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. My mother just nodded, too ashamed to fight. Ethan? He hated it. He wasn't being put first, wasn't being handed comfort on a silver platter, and I could see it burning in his eyes. But he had no choice. I held all the cards. The first week passed in tense, awkward silence. My father, stripped of his usual authority, kept to himself. My mother, desperate to make peace, tried to play the role of a grateful guest, cooking meals and keeping the house clean. Ethan? He sulked. The golden child, the one who had never known struggle, was finally learning what it felt like. I caught him staring at me sometimes, resentment burning behind his gaze. He hated needing me, but hate wasn't enough to change his situation. He still had to live by my rules. And then, one night, he snapped. I found him in the kitchen, slamming cabinets, muttering under his breath. "You think this makes you better than me?" He spat when he noticed me watching. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, Ethan. It proves I was always better than you." His hands clenched into fists. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I tilted my head. "You tell me. Did you enjoy watching me struggle? Did you enjoy knowing I was out there, starving, while you had everything handed to you?" His face darkened. That wasn't my fault. I took a step forward, lowering my voice to a deadly calm. "No, but you never gave a damn either, did you?" He had no answer to that, because we both knew the truth. I stared him down, letting the silence stretch. Then, finally, I turned away. "You want my help? You earn it, just like I had to." And I left him standing there, drowning in the consequences of his own privilege. Because this was only the beginning. There is a point where satisfaction turns into something else. something darker. At first, watching my parents and Ethan struggle under my rules had been gratifying. Seeing them stripped of the comfort they had once denied me, watching the weight of their choices settle on their shoulders, it had been justice. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. They weren't just suffering, they were breaking. My father, once a man who had held himself with unshakable confidence, had become a shell of who he used to be. He spent most of his time in the small, cramped bedroom I had given him, avoiding eye contact, his pride crushed under the weight of his failures. My mother, ever the peacemaker, tried to hold everything together, cooking meals, keeping the house spotless, trying to make herself useful, to prove that she still had some value in my life. And Ethan? Ethan hated me. At first he had tried to rebel, slamming doors, snapping at me, acting like a petulant child who had been forced to share his toys. But now he was silent. I had taken the last thing he had, his entitlement, the belief that he would always come first, that the world would bend for him the way it always had. And without that, he had nothing. And that was when I realized something. This wasn't justice anymore. This was punishment. And I had to decide when it was enough. It happened one night at the dinner table. We ate in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. The only sounds were the clinking of forks against plates, the quiet shifting of chairs, the tension pressing against us like a second skin. Then, my mother finally spoke. "I know we can never undo what we did to you." I didn't look up, but I need you to know that I regret it. I set my fork down, carefully, deliberately. "Do you?" Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "I do, every single day." For a long time I had wanted to hear those words. I had craved them. I had imagined this moment over and over again. How she would finally acknowledge what she had done. How my father would finally show some remorse. How Ethan would finally understand what it was like to be me. And now that it was happening, it felt hollow. Because regret wasn't enough. Regret didn't erase the years I spent starving, struggling, fighting for survival while they lived comfortably without a second thought. "You only regret it because you lost everything," I said finally, my voice eerily calm. "Not because you actually cared." She flinched. My father's grip tightened around his fork. "I do care," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Then why didn't you ever check on me?" She had no answer, because we both knew the truth. If I had died on the streets, if I had failed, if I had disappeared into the endless cycle of struggle they had thrown me into, they never would have known, and they never would have asked. I exhaled, my fingers drumming against the table. "Here's the thing," I said slowly. "I don't need you to regret what you did. I don't need apologies. I don't need your guilt." Ethan stared at me, something unreadable in his gaze. "Then what do you need?" my father asked gruffly. I met his eyes and I saw fear. "I need you to leave." At first they didn't move, as if they couldn't process what I had just said. But I didn't waver. "You had a place here," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I gave you a chance to earn my help, and I think you finally understand what it felt like to be me. But this was never permanent." I looked at Ethan. "Not for you either." His jaw tightened. "You're seriously kicking us out?" I tilted my head. "You mean like you did to me?" Silence. "Where are we supposed to go?" my mother whispered. I shrugged. "That's not my problem, just like it wasn't yours when I was 18. My father exhaled sharply through his nose. "You don't have to do this," he said, but his voice lacked the authority it once held. "I do," I said. "Because if I let you stay, it means I'm still trapped in this cycle. It means I haven't really moved on. And I have." I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "You have a month. After that, you're on your own." Ethan pushed back his chair roughly, his eyes burning with resentment. "You think this makes you better than us?" I met his glare head on. "No, Ethan, I was always better than you. You just never saw it." His lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't argue, because deep down, he knew it was true. And that was enough. A month later, they were gone. My house was quiet again, peaceful. No more tension, no more walking into a room filled with unspoken apologies and festering guilt. I felt light. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for revenge, for karma, for some cosmic balance to make things right. Because I had done that for myself. I had won. And as I stood in the doorway of my home, looking out at the empty street, I realized something. I had spent years waiting for my parents to see me, to recognize my worth. But I didn't need their validation anymore, because I knew who I was. And that was more valuable than anything they could ever give me.